Good morning. I am Katie. I'm the general manager at ADAC, and I am so excited to welcome all of you to day one of Discover ADAC, our fall market. So thank you all so much for being here. Before I turn things over for what you know is going to be a fabulous presentation this morning, I want to take care of a few housekeeping items. I want to remind everybody to grab a copy of the event guide. They are located in the back of our presentation room. If you're not registered for events this week, do register because things will sell out. And if you need any help with any of the registration, just grab one of our team members. A couple of fun things in the event guide this year. We did show off all of our newest Southeast Designers and Architect of the Year award winners that were awarded in our Spring Market Design ADAC, and that was awarded by ADAC and Veranda. So check out those award winners. We also have a list of our newest showrooms and our new expansion showrooms. So we have some really great new debuts this year here at ADAC, and we want all of you to go check them out. So when you have some time in between presentations, go see those new showrooms. Have some fun with us on social media. Our hashtag is DiscoverADAC, and our handle is @ADACAtlanta. Take pictures, do videos and reels and all the fun stuff you do on social media, but just make sure you tag us so that we can share all the fun that you all are having. I want to thank HA Modern designer Tim Hobby for our fabulous stage decor. They have a showroom upstairs on the 4th floor, so go check that out. And if you want to see any of the products or want to know where they're sourced from, because it is from all over ADAC, there's a source list in the back of the presentation room. And then I want to thank our sponsors this morning. Our media partner today is Veranda. Our showroom is Perennials in Sutherland. And don't forget that after this presentation, we're going to go upstairs to Suite 227 for a reception and book signing with Timothy. And I know you cannot wait to get a copy of this book. I might have to race you to the table. So just heads up. And then with that, I'm going to turn things over to Veranda Executive Editor Ellen McGauley.
Thank you, Katie. Thank you. Big round of applause for the entire ADAC team. I just want to thank you again. Every time we walk through the doors here, either in the spring or the fall, it feels like home. We see all of these familiar faces. Even just walking through the parking lot today, I found like Courtney and I, you just know you're home. You know you're in the Southeast at the center of design. So thank you to that entire team. And I want to also thank Perennials, David Sutherland's studio. They're all sprinkled all in here. Thank you so much. You're such a wonderful partner to Veranda, and we're very much looking forward to going to your showroom afterwards. We're going to do some book signings. That's where the party is. So I just want to thank you so much for partnering with us on this. So what you're all here to see is my guest today. Sorry, I'm just going to move this. There we go. Timothy, to properly introduce you, I could never get to all the accolades, but I'll just mention a few. You've been on Elle Decor's A-List, AD 100. You've received the Institute of Classical Architecture and Art's prestigious Legacy Award. You've just published your third book, book number 3, At Home in France, which we see up here, and you will see in person at the showroom, at the Perennials Sutherland showroom after this. At Home in France, Inspiration and Style in Town and Country. And we're going to be talking a lot about this. I am equally as excited about the cover of Veranda this September, October, and this is from those pages. This is your chateau in France that we are going to all be diving into. So you have rug and fabric lines with Perennials. You have trim with Samuel & Sons, wallpaper with Fromental, china with Royal Limoges. But at the heart of all of this, there's a story I heard last week that I think gives a more intimate glimpse at Timothy Corrigan as a designer that we've all followed for years. I was with a large group of very talented designers at London Design Week, and I was talking about how excited I was to come to ADAC and speak with you and really kind of pick your brain and talk about this chateau. And one of the designers, whose name I won't mention because I didn't tell him I was going to tell him this story. So we were sitting across from each other at a lunch, and he said, yes, I know Timothy. By the way, I haven't told Timothy this
Yeah,
story either,
first-
so we
first
had
time.
dinner and everything.
I'm like, all ears.
He said, I know Timothy, I moved to LA to start my design career, and I didn't really know what direction to go in at all. And I called him up hoping for a job, and he didn't have one for me, but he invited me in. He told me, he sat there and he told me, and I made some notes about it. He spent time talking with me about the direction I might go in. He steered me and just told me things. He told me what he thought maybe would be helpful, and it was probably such a small moment for him, but it was a big moment for this talented designer who has gone on to open his own firm now and is doing quite well. And getting to know Timothy a bit more, I've known that this spirit of teaching and mentorship and community, it's not just an extra half hour in his day. That is good design. That is the legacy of good design. So with that, I want to say welcome, Timothy. We're so honored to have you here.
Thank you, thank you. It's a great honor to be here. I absolutely love Atlanta. I think it's probably my favorite city in America. What I love about it is that so many cities, were created because they were built on a river or a port or whatever. There's not many cities that were built around in the middle of a forest, in the middle of a woods, and I love that aspect because it's such a beautiful city. And you all probably take it for granted, but you guys have got the most amazing architecture. There's a love of home. There's a love of entertaining, which is really so special. So I think you're really lucky to be in Atlanta. And ADAC is, I will tell you, by far my favorite design center in the world. And I'm not just saying this.
He said it over dinner last night.
I told her at dinner this is true.
So, yeah.
And what I want to tell you, and again, I think you probably take it for granted. There is the ADAC is such a great design center for a number of different reasons. I think you've got amazing management. You've got the architecture of the building is such that it's conducive to looking at design. You go in and you go out, and you've got the different aspects of that. But it's all of that, but there's a camaraderie amongst the design industry here in the Southeast that is really different. And I can tell you that from other cities. I'll tell you, in Washington, D.C., literally designers say, oh, we don't talk to each other. We're all competitors. And I'm like, we are all in the same industry. And that's one of the problems. We need to be collaborative. We need to help each other. We need to stick together because we are all working on our little individual silos. And that's why it's so important to break out, to come to things like this and to collaborate with each other. So again, I love ADAC, and it's a great honor to be here. So thank you so much for your welcome. Thank you.
Oh, well, speaking of beautiful places, we're going to spend the morning in the French countryside, which is very exciting. Okay. The restoration and decoration of your most recent chateau, Chevalerie, is detailed in your new book, and it is detailed. And when I say detailed, that and your apartment. We focused on the chateau, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. You and I adapted it for the September-October issue of Veranda, where it appears on the cover. And what I'd like to do with our time today is, if you'll take us into the restoration and decoration process that goes into adapting such a grand historic property for modern use. How does it make sense for today? And I think we're going to use your current residence, Chevalerie, to talk through how you might do something like this. But before we do that, I just want to go back a moment to talk about you weren't born in France, your relationship with France, how this was born.
Great, absolutely. So I first moved to France in 1987. So, and I used to work in advertising, and I was running the European operations for a big advertising agency. And so I've lived in France for a long time. A couple of years ago, the Point of View, which is known as it's sort of the French version of Vanity Fair, did an article about me, and they basically they referred to me as the most Francophile of American decorators because I really understand the excellence of French know-how and how they design, and that's really why I've actually even been tapped to create lines for French brands like Royal Limoges, which is the oldest porcelain company in the world, and THG Paris, which is sort of, again, one of the top plumbing fixture companies in the world, is that they understood that I understand France, but I also understand the international market, the American market, and how to adapt things that way. So to give you just a sense of how how I got there. That's sort of how I developed. I was in France, I was working, and I started doing some design work. I started doing design for myself. My apartment in Paris was featured in House and Garden magazine at the time House and Garden was still around. And then I had a country house which was featured in World of Interiors. And people started asking me if I would do design work.
Because you were just
I was
working in your advertising job.
And,
yeah.
Yep, and people started asking me if I would help them out with design. And I started doing that sort of as my nighttime job. I soon realized that I really enjoyed my nighttime job a lot better than my daytime job. So I decided to quit one and go to the other. So that's really how I made the transition from design. And so that's when I moved back to America and then opened my design firm.
And then, which is amazing because
Yeah.
you were exactly where you needed to be. I'm going to now turn to this. You have now bought and restored 4 different chateaus. And Timothy uses a term that you'll see up here, chateauaholic, that we quickly ripped off and took as ours. And you'll see that in the magazine. Big letters. You should have seen our conversations about how to break it on the page. It's not actually a word, so then how do you break a word that's not a word? But we managed to do it. It was fine. You are a self-proclaimed chateauaholic. What do you mean by this?
Well, I started with, as I mentioned, with the 17th century manor house, and as with most addictions, you start small, and then it gets bigger and it gets more out of control. I just loved the process of understanding the history of these old structures, understanding how that they interacted historically within the community, the people who lived in them, the roles they played, and how they evolved over time. So my first chateau was the one you're seeing on the left, which is called Chateau de Blainville, and it was a 17th century chateau. It was in the Louis XIII style, which is brick and stone. And this became a little bit like Goldilocks, who was trying to find what was just right. Well, this chateau, I liked it, and it was a great starter chateau. But it was a little too plain. So I moved to the next. I thought, well, let's try something more grand, substantial. So I then got Chateau de Gallerande, which was a 15th century chateau, the typical fairy tale princess chateau with these towers and Rapunzel let down your hair and all that. But what I hadn't really counted on was the fact that it was 15th century, so the walls were so thick, where they were made of stone, that they were 3 feet thick, so that even though you can see the windows are not even that big, so that by the time the light got onto the inside, it was a really dark chateau. So that was a little too dark. So, so I went to my third chateau, which, let's see, we go there.
It takes a little bit of maneuvering. It's great. Wait till you see it.
Okay. Hang on.
Maybe I can try it.
Is our battery dead? Maybe
I can try it.
Oh, there we go. Okay, there we go. You got the touch? So this was Chateau du Grand Lucé, which means the Chateau of the Grand Light. It was owned by the French government, and I actually did my first book was on the chateau, and I actually spoke on it here at ADAC maybe 10, 12 years ago. It was owned by the French government. They decided to sell it because they'd never restored the inside. The gardens were in really not great shape. So it not surprisingly, didn't get a lot of tourists coming to see it. So they decided to sell it. And the French architects, it was a historic landmark, the French architects of France said, it's the most important example of neoclassical architecture in France. You can't sell it just to have it be broken up into a hotel or into apartments or whatever. And I was the only person applying to restore it as a home. So I did it. I did these incredible gardens. This just shows you a little bit of it. The gardens were extensive. There were 25 acres of formal gardens, which required 5 full-time gardeners. And in the summertime, you had to add 2 more gardeners. This only shows a part of the chateau. It was 45,000 square feet plus all the additional outer buildings. So this chateau was lovely and wonderful, but as Goldilocks would say, it actually was just a little too grand. So I decided to sell it. Interestingly enough, it has since been turned into a hotel. Some Americans bought it, and it's actually been on the cover of Condé Nast Traveler. It's ranked one of the top 10 boutique hotels in the world now. So you can go stay there, and I always sort of cringe that my bedroom rents for 15,000 euros a night. So I sort of think, gee, maybe I should have gone into the hotel business. But anyway, so I decided to go on to a fourth chateau, but I didn't do it without first going to see a therapist, because all my friends said, a fourth chateau? Are you crazy? You must be dealing with some unresolved childhood issue. Like, you weren't given enough building blocks, you know? And, but I went to the therapist, and the therapist actually said, no, you're reframing this. You got to reframe this. You're thinking of this as, because you lose money. What leads into this is you lose money on chateau. There are 40,000 chateaux in France, and a lot of them are for sale, because the cost to renovate is always at least double the purchase price. And then there's the maintenance aspects. So they're not money makers. So I lost money in every single one. And so the psychiatrist said to me, you've got to reframe it. You're looking at it from a typical American perspective of making money on your real estate investments. Stop thinking of it that way. Think of it as a hobby. Think about it. If you're a yachtsman, do you expect to make money on your yacht? No. If you're a golf player, you're not making money, so unless you're really good. So think of it as the fact that this is the price of your hobby. And then I started thinking about it more, and I thought, not only is it the price of my hobby, it's also part of as a designer, my creative inspiration. It allows me to play and experience different things and try different color combinations and things like that on a very big scale. So I started looking again, and I looked at over 50 chateaux. I looked at chateau, a very famous one called Bagatelle, which was a tiny little chateau. I looked at Madame Pompadour's chateau, which was like a 70,000 square foot chateau. So I looked at all these different ones, and I finally came upon this chateau, which is Chateau Chevalerie. And this is what it looks like now. It didn't look like this when I bought it. It was a beautiful chateau that had actually been referred to as the Versailles of the Fields, because it's a small little chateau, relatively small for chateau standards, but the inside was just a real jewel. So I decided that this was the chateau that I would buy. I just fell in love with it at first sight, and this gives you a sense. And if I'm going to let you do this, because there we go.
Oh, there we go.
It had these incredible gates. These are the gates from the former Tuileries Palace in Paris, where the Tuileries Gardens are now. And this is what the chateau looks like today. So it was a chateau that I just fell in love with at first sight.
And you talked a bit about how the scale was kind of right for you and what you fell in love with. We can see a lot of the exterior, but you shopped all over the country once you got out of the psychiatrist's office and like, I'm going in, What was so special about this one? What did you?
Well, what's interesting is, it's a great question, is that the chateau was built over periods of time. So the other ones were all very specific of one period. This was a chateau that had been added on to over the years. So the original section in one of the right-hand wings was from 1640, and it started as a hunting lodge. And then it had farm buildings added onto it, and it kept getting added onto. So they added the left wing in the 18th century, and then what you can see is, it's sort of tricky to see, but if you can look and see, you see the chateau actually extends, the main part of the chateau extends farther on the right where the tower is. Well, that really bugged the owner of the chateau in the 19th century, because it was all symmetrical except for the fact that this one wing didn't line up with the wing on the other side. So he built those towers just to disguise the asymmetry of the building. And it's interesting because it really does a pretty good job. You can't, unless you really look, you don't see that other little wing protruding further out on the right. So it was a wonderful chateau. It was a quirky chateau. It was one that had been added onto over time, and different rooms had been added on. But what I really fell in love with was the boiserie, or the paneling. Many chateaux have incredible paneling. This has got some of the finest paneling, so much so that actually a German professor of 18th century was just came to the chateau 2 weeks ago and is writing a whole book on the paneling in this chateau alone, because it's by some of the most famous artisans of the 18th century. So you look at the picture on the left; those are some of the over doors in the main living room, and they're actually they're 6 feet wide, 3 feet high, 2 feet thick. They're wood sculptures, and they're totally three-dimensional, depicting the four seasons, and on the other two doors are depicting the arts and sciences. So it had incredible paneling. It had incredible parquet flooring, and again, just to sort of see. What am I doing wrong? There we go. To see the paneling, that's this three-dimensional. Usually you would expect to see that to be plaster or stucco, but it's actually all carved out of wood. So it was just the most amazing thing, and it has Parquet de Versailles on all 3 floors. Most chateaux will maybe, if they have Parquet de Versailles, will maybe have it in the grand reception rooms, but definitely not on the 2nd floor or the 3rd floor. Here it was throughout. So it was just the quality of construction that I fell in love with so much in a relatively small chateau. It's 18,000 square feet, but as chateau goes, that's not a big chateau, but it had amazing quality, and it also had the bones of an amazing garden. The garden was designed by a man named Edouard André, who was the biggest landscape architect of France of the 19th century. In fact, he was hired by the French government to design the Tuileries Gardens, the Tuileries Gardens we all go to. He was designing those at the same time that he was designing the gardens at my chateau. So the gates, that's how the gates got there, was they didn't need the gates for the palace, because there had been a palace where the Tuileries Gardens are now, that had burned down. So he took the gates from that job and put them at my job. So he just sort of happily reutilized them. But it had these wonderful, he diverted a river, a stream, and created these incredible canals. So there's close to a mile long of these incredible canals where you have a rowboat and things like that. So it was just one of the reasons it's called the Versailles of the Fields, because it's got all the grandeur of the Versailles, but on a much smaller basis, literally set in the middle of the countryside.
And not 5 full-time gardeners.
No, not 5.
Okay,
So
all right.
just 2. Okay. So,
well, now, when it comes to you buy it and then you really kind of start digging into what needs to be done here. Yeah. And we're talking both about restoration and just fixing things,
yes,
right?
Yes.
So how extensive was that? So
the renovation was complete. You have to do sort of a total renovation when you do these things. The chateau fortunately did not need significant new roofs. The last chateau, Grand Lucé, the roofs alone were €5.5 million. Just for the slate roofs. So this did not need a lot. So that was one of the things I was looking at, was I was not going to get into another one where it needed a lot of major roof work. This one, all the stone needed to be done, all the interior needed to be done. I had to put in, I actually put in air conditioning, which is, again, all the French were like, oh no, air conditioning, that's so unhealthy for you. And I said, well, yes, it may be unhealthy, but the rest of the world uses it. So, and so we put in heating, and I actually learned how to put in air conditioning in an old structure like this. I was doing the American Embassy in Paris, which some of you may have come to when we had a party there for perennials, I think, just before COVID. I had done the embassy, and we actually learned how to put in air conditioning without having to remove all the beautiful paneling, without having to lower ceilings, because that oftentimes it really destroys the architectural integrity. But we were able to do that, so we've got it. We put in air conditioning throughout, new electricity, new plumbing, everything. So from head to toe was redone. So you can sort of see that process. All for the paint literally had to be stripped by a heat gun to get back all the layers, to go back to the raw wood. There are over 100 acres of property here, and so all the original drainage from the woods and things like that they were clay tile pipes. They'd all been broken over the years, so that all had to be added in as well. And the garden had incredible, when I bought it, incredible boxwood topiary. But if you may have heard that in France, there's a boxwood blight. So boxwood's basically been wiped out over all of France. Versailles no longer has any boxwood. All the great chateaus have lost all their boxwood. And I unfortunately lost mine after I bought it as well. So that meant, hang on, I had to put in over 2,500 new trees and shrubs throughout all the gardens. So it was a major undertaking. I had to put in all new French drains around the chateau, and very unfortunately, I was doing a lot of the renovation during COVID, and so there was not a lot of management. I certainly wasn't there, and the guy had managing it wasn't there that often. And one day, the painters, they were stripping all the paint off of the window panes, the mullions of the windows, and they didn't do it by hand as they should have. They used electric sanders, and ended up scratching over 2,500, I think it was 2,500, 18th century panes of glass, all of which needed to be replaced to the tune of 450,000 euros. There was a lot of sort of little setbacks like that, but I got the chateau done, and I actually started photographing it for the new book, and we'd photographed the principal salon, and we started photographing it, and the next morning, I had a pounding on the door, and the photographer woke me up at 5:30 in the morning saying, "There's a flood, there's a flood." And so the unexpected surprise that I want to share with you was what I call the plumber from hell, who had not properly connected all the pipes and the joints with the sinks. And in one of the bathrooms over the grand salon, one of the hot water pipes come undone, and literally for hours, because it was in the middle of the night, hot water had been flooding down from the floor of this bathroom down into the floor below. And what I later learned is that hot water is the real enemy of an old house, because these beams are 300 years old, et cetera. They just absorb the hot water like a sponge. So let me just share with you what I discovered that morning. And let me just, what am I doing wrong?
Let me see.
It doesn't
Might
like
just
me.
be a different.
There we go. This is what we woke up to. And within an hour, within an hour, the entire ceiling collapsed. But what was interesting is, if I want to go back to this just for a second, if I can, okay, is you can see that is a perennials rug. And all the water fell on perennial sofas. So literally all we had to do was take these because they were really beyond, even thought destroyed. We just took them outside, let them dry in the sun, and they survived totally unscathed. So it's
All right.
okay. So that was. So there were a lot of setbacks. Whenever you do construction, you've all done. If any of you done construction, I'm sure a lot of you have. There are always setbacks, and you just sort of have to plan for them. This one had a few more than I would have liked, but it was.
Yes.
But it's all part of the process.
What I love about this is that when you and I were working on the story, for the magazine, we don't really include a lot of that. I hadn't heard of the extent of some of this.
Yes,
so
it's always fun.
Yeah, I don't think that would be on the cover so
yes,
much,
exactly.
But what a great story,
Yeah.
although I'm sure it was totally taken.
And it's funny also because in the new book, I wanted to do a lot of before photos, and they were like, the publishers were like, no. Consumers don't really want it. They just want to see pretty.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't really know that I agree with that. I think people actually like to be involved and see that process.
Yeah, they do like the before and after. Okay, speaking of, we really want to talk about how you've adapted. You can adapt the grand, like what did you do with some of the rooms that were maybe for one purpose before, and now you say, well, this is how we're going to use it now, and how you did that thoughtfully, and how you felt about doing that as well, saying, well, this is how it used to be, and because it's not a straight preservation kind of project, but this is for your own modern use. Talk to us about some of these.
I think this is true, and thank you. It's a great question, because I think it's true whether you're dealing with a house from the 17th or 18th century or a house that was built in 1990, is that you really have to figure out how you are going to use that space, how your clients want to use that space. Because just because a room was created as a dining room and you're not going to use it as a dining room, then why leave it as that? Really, it's so sad to me when I see rooms that, like, so many dining rooms get used twice a year on holidays, whatever. It's sad to me to have rooms that just go unused. And so I'll give you an example. We had a client who they said they never used their living room. And I said, well, what if we put a television in there? Would that help? And they said, no, we've got a TV room for that. We don't need that. So I started talking to them about what their passions were, and their passions were wine. And so we actually created the entire perimeter of the room became a wine cellar with refrigerated beautiful wine cabinets, et cetera. And it became a place that they say that's now, after their kitchen, the most used place, because they actually go in after dinner, and there's a sofa, there's all these other things in there, but they really use it, and so it's adapted for their needs.
It becomes a record of how the people there in that time are living.
Exactly,
rather than a
exactly.
reflection. Yeah.
And if you look at rooms throughout history, they have evolved. Originally when these chateaus were first built, there were not dedicated dining rooms. They would just put up a table wherever they sort of wanted. So I think it's so important to look that rooms need to be flexible. They need to be able to work for you. And I think that COVID, to me, really made that all the more clear. Is that you really needed to figure out, when everyone was home, and how to make rooms more multifunctional and not just for one thing. So here, I wanted it to be a faithful restoration of the chateau, but it needed to be one that, while it respected the past, was reflective of how we live today. So let's face it, a lot of these old houses, I'm sure here in Atlanta, a lot of houses have maids' quarters, a lot of big old houses. Well, who has maids live in maids anymore? How you do that? I did a project in Santa Barbara which had literally the staff quarters was as large as the main house. There were 7 maids' rooms and everything else. Well, they didn't want a single live-in. So you take that space and reutilize it for the needs of today. So that's what I did here. So the original kitchen had been built outside the chateau, which was often the case, because for fear of fire. They didn't want to have it burned down. That's often the case. Even here, we're doing a project in Charleston, which is from 1740, I think, and the original kitchen was outside the structure. Again, so it wasn't that unusual. So this kitchen had been added into the. I'm going to go 2 slides forward. Hang on, let me just go. There we go. So this on the right you'll see is the cover of this month's veranda. That room that you're looking into was what had been the kitchen that was added to the chateau in the 19th century. So you can see it on the left, what it looked like before. You can see there's the cooktop and the sink, et cetera. Frankly, it was not a good kitchen. It had no storage. Kitchens in France historically are actually not that good. It's amazing they can create such great food in such sort of inadequate spaces. But that was the kitchen, and I decided, well, no, I don't want the kitchen to be there. So I actually turned that room into a room. It's called the porcelain room, where I store my porcelain. But so then I had to figure out how to. But there we go. Where to create a kitchen. So this was the room on the left, had been what was called the hunt breakfast room. It's where they would go after going fox hunting or hunting for deer, et cetera. And you can see there's that big fireplace where they actually had a spigot to turn animals while they're burning and being cooked. And so I took that room and converted that into the kitchen. And you can see I then brought this wonderful Delft tile, 18th century tile in, and now it's just this wonderful kitchen for the way we live today. It was, with the bar stools and things like that. And totally not the way you can see even the way they lived in the kitchen, even till I bought it, where it was really a place to go, do the function and leave. Where now it's a place where you go and spend time. So that was how I changed and created a kitchen. Let me go to my bathroom. I created my bedroom in a room that had been the artist studio, and there was no bathroom anywhere near it. So I actually took, on the left it was a stables that for cows and things like that, and that's that same space now as my bathroom. So you can see it's literally taking a space and reworking it for the needs of today.
Now, in doing that, you also, anyone who knows your work knows that comfort is non-negotiable. Everything has to be comfortable. It has to be something that you would live in. You kind of touched on that. How do you take the stuffiness out of a historic house and really make it more livable? And what elements do you use to relax the home?
Great. It's interesting. I was, when I started design, one of the things, and I really learned this from living in France, is French design is beautiful, but it is not what I would call comfortable. There's lots of spindly gold furniture. They don't understand. They don't really understand. They don't understand comfort. There was a wonderful French historian who actually wrote a book called The Invention of Comfort, and it was really the idea of adding some upholstery to a chair in the 18th century. Was like the invention of comfort, but they really never figured that out. So when I decided to become a designer, I decided that comfort was really a key element. So much so, and I'm sorry to mention another magazine, but when I was named to AD 100, they actually wrote about the fact that I was this bizarre, weird designer who felt that a room was not successful, no matter how beautiful it was, if it wasn't also comfortable. Because back then, comfort, it was not, even as recently as this was the early 90s, it was more about how it looked than how it lived. And I thought, no, it's got to be really comfortable. And I started out with comfort being something that was, gee, is this sofa comfortable? Literally, is this fabric soft? It was really the physical aspects about comfort. But I soon really realized that comfort, there are really three components of comfort. There's the physical aspect of comfort, but there's also the practical aspect about comfort. Can I spill red wine on this sofa and not worry about it? Can I put a hot coffee cup on this table and not worry about it, leaving a ring? Those aspects, we've all been in houses where the host or hostess is like, oh, don't put that there. Like you're not comfortable in that kind of house,
Yeah.
and you feel it immediately. And so it's that aspect of figuring out how you can use technology, frankly, and introduce elements of comfort from a practical standpoint. So that was the next aspect, was the practical aspect of comfort. And the third was one that again, it's what I would call the psychological aspect of comfort, which is, and I've done a lot of research on this, color, for example, actually creates a sense of comfort. Rooms that are all white look really pretty, but you actually feel not that comfortable in them. Symmetry is something that brings comfort, because when you walk into a space that's really symmetrical, your mind doesn't have to figure out, gee, how does this work? It does, it's the whole thing about, flight or flight,
Fight or flight.
Fight or flight, yes. Whatever. It's like you walk into a room and you go, okay, I know where I am here.
Yeah.
So it's other aspects of that. It's a scale, proportion, whether there's enough room to get around comfortably. So it's those three aspects. So I really, comfort to me is one of the most essential things.
Yeah.
But let me just talk, I'm going to talk a little bit about
these next slides are wow.
Okay, so these are two of the living rooms in the chateau, and again, it's comfortable. They're comfortable. You see, it's comfortable furniture. The coffee table's got a stone top. You don't have to worry about that. Just as a trick, if there is a wood top, anytime we have wood furniture, we put a marine varnish on it, so you don't have to worry about stains. So the heat ring doesn't create a stain. Water on the glass doesn't create a ring on the wood. So that's something. But here I took marble for the coffee table. Comfortable furniture, and like. Both there and in the next picture, that is all outdoor fabric. So, and outdoor rugs. So again, would you do white carpeting? I mean, white carpeting is lovely. I love it. But if it's wool or silk, I mean, you look at it and it's going to stain. So these are carpets from Perennials that I designed for Perennial. They're part of my new collection. The fabrics are from my new collection. The picture on the left are fabrics from the new collection. So there's leaping leopards and striped azure, which is a wonderful velvet, white velvet. And again, it's all about practicality, and I think that's, and again, I don't mean to make this sound like it's a pitch for Perennials. It's a pitch for performance, and it's a pitch for designing where people can be comfortable. So I still do silk, I still do things, but they're on pillows. There are other things that are accents where if you spill on it, you ruin it. It's not the same problem as it is if you ruin the carpet, if you ruin the sofa. So that's one aspect. And I just want to show you here again a close-up. It's one of my rugs for Perennials on the left. The center is a collection I did for Kyle Bunting, which are hide rugs. Rugs are very durable. The thing about those cows, they've lived outside, they've been rolling in the mud, et cetera. They can deal with the spills, et cetera. And you can also use bleach on their products as well. So again, I'm really about practicality. And in the dining room, the informal dining room, there's white velvet on those chairs. Well, again, like who uses white velvet on a dining room chair? Well, you can if it's Perennials and if it's this outdoor fabric where you can, and I just want to say all outdoor fabrics are not created equal. And again, I don't want to sound like a pitch, but you really want to make sure that you're using solution dyed acrylic, because if not, you really can't safely bleach it. So there's a lot of outdoor companies, a lot of fabrics that say they're outdoor, but they're actually not so performance. You really can't clean them with bleach and other things like that, which you really want to be concerned with. So I think those are the two aspects of how I design from a worry-free aspect of the house. From a design perspective, I think one of the things that the French really do well is they use whimsy throughout their house. They don't take themselves too seriously. So you can see here's a sculpture of Caesar, and he's got a Chinese coolie hat on him. There's another sculpture where there's a necklace on her, or this little wonderful mannequin who's in the front hall saying, "Hey, welcome." It's those aspects of being playful. And I think the French really understand that. They understand that it shouldn't be too stuffy. It should, you have these wonderful, elegant elements, but then you're not taking them so seriously. And I think that's one of the key things about French design versus American design, is that French design usually does not look, it usually looks like it's evolved over time, as opposed to just having where the designer has just walked out of the house and everything's perfect. You want it to feel like it has just sort of has happened over time and has evolved naturally.
Timothy, I would also add to that we can never really put our finger on, not never, we often can't put our finger on what makes a house that goes into veranda versus the ones that we have to pass on. And because we get so many great projects, often it's exactly what you just said, which is that collected over time, there's some whimsy to it, there's some personality to it, rather than the designer just walked out the front door and said, "Don't anybody mess it up," know?
Yes.
So
yeah, exactly.
we can see it, even if we can't point to exactly which part of the room is telling us that.
Yes, yeah.
So anyway, I just wanted to interject that.
The next thing is just using, I tell you, the French tend to stack things a lot. You'll see piles of books stacked up. You'll see art just sort of casually sitting there. This is a John Singer Sargent drawing that's just sort of casually propped there, which again, so it's almost like saying, I'm not taking this so seriously. It's just like, okay. One of the things that I think is really important with guests is liquor. So making a home making you feel welcome. And I actually, and I think it's something that you should all do, is develop your own cocktail. And it's an easy thing to do. This is one that I did, which has got cucumber, for example, a cucumber and vodka, some things and a lime, and it's called a Tim-tini. And whenever people come, there's a tray of Tim-tinis there because alcohol always makes people feel more welcome. But when I have house guests, I do things like, literally they're coming, I'll give them the list of who else is coming, if there's other house guests there, who else is there. I always do a note. There's always, a little welcome thing, just to make people feel special. I think that's such a key thing with house guests, is making your house guests feel special. And it doesn't take that much work. It literally can just be, something you just went out and bought a donut and put a thing of fresh flowers and just put a note saying, I'm so glad you're here. So I think, that's that. The third picture is a fun picture I want to show you, where when I do house parties, we do every day, we'll do one day a thing where everyone gets a mask in their room in the morning, and it says who they are, and it's a different character from the 18th century, a different person. And then I've got this place with just all these different costumes and boas and scarves and things like that, and they actually come and dress up and come to the lunch as that character. And it's such a great fun way because they tell who their character is. And the other final way that I think it's really important, and people often forget about this, is bed linens. Bed linens, good bed linens make all the difference. I cannot tell you how many people come to me and say, I have never slept so well. Where are those sheets from? They are so soft. They're so wonderful. So again, it's so important. Just have at least one set of good bed linens to welcome your guests.
It's a great point. I hear people talking about that more than you realize.
Yes,
Bed linens, the little secrets for that. Does your design approach differ between projects in Europe and America? Because you're designing, you're designing all over the world.
Yes. Yeah, we're working, just to give you a sense, we're working right now in 8 different countries around the world. We're working in 13 states. We're doing the world's largest private yacht. We've done 2 jets this year. So we do a lot of big projects all around the world. And what's interesting is, I will say, America is a little different on one key component. And that, I'd say, is that I think Americans, for the most part, I will tell you, y'all down here in the Southeast are the exception. The rest of this country is really afraid of color and afraid of pattern. Houston, for example, they're like pattern. They're like, don't. When I came out with a collection for Schumacher and I was at the showroom there, they're like, your collection is going to really do badly here. And I said, why? And they said, because we only do solids here. So I think that again, I would say the biggest difference between America and certainly Europe is the fear of color. The project you're seeing on the right is a project we did in London for the Emir of Qatar, and it's all about bold color. The project on the left was on the cover of Elle Decor magazine. It's an amazing project in Chicago with incredible art collection, but it was 1,000 shades of cream. I mean, it was just that they were afraid of color. Another project is project we did in La Jolla. Again, the client was like, I like beige. I like beige. I like beige. And that's what we got. It was beige. Whereas, this project in Paris, where it's about color. So I would say color is the biggest thing that differentiates. And as I say, that's one of the reason I feel so at home in Atlanta. You all love color, you love pattern. But I'll tell you, you're not like the rest of the country, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, I see Katie's got her microphone, so we will move through these slides pretty quickly.
Thank you.
These last ones.
I talk too much?
No. I think color, again, with this audience, let's talk a little bit about how you devise your color schemes.
Great.
I want to make sure we hit on that one.
So I'll tell you, in the chateau, what I did is I've got 13 different bedrooms, and with each with their own bathroom, and I wanted each one to feel like it was unique. So I actually thought about, gee, who would stay in this room? Who would, what kind of personality? So you can see here's a blue and yellow room. The next room is embracing these warm colors. It felt like it was more of a country house. The next room was named Chambre de Pompadour.
Love that room.
It's pink and green. And then the one on the right is sort of very much more contemporary with a light blue and a strong green and black. So again, I think color is so important, and I wanted a diversity of color throughout the rooms.
Yeah, and that plays into your Southern California influence as well.
Great. Yeah. So as a designer from Southern California, I love light, bright spaces. So you can see this room in the chateau, which is again, very light and bright, and that really affected me. People have said to me, gee, your houses in France, I always feel like they maybe should be in California, and your houses in California, I always feel like maybe they should be in France. And I think that's the key, is that it reflects all of who you are and all your personality, so that it doesn't feel like it's trying to be a museum piece. It really does have the mix of both worlds. The next is again, showing, when I actually realized in putting this presentation together, that Californians love white furniture. So I realized, oh my gosh, I've used a lot of white sofas and chairs in my projects. So again, I see that's how I've brought some of the California into Europe. And this was the former chapel at the chateau, which was dark and somber, and this is very European, this dark, somber, and I was like, that's not going to work for me. So I totally changed it and transformed it, both from a chapel as well to a dining room, but you can see how it's light and bright. So I would say that's the biggest differential between how I use color and California, how it influences me.
I would also call this photo first runner-up, because this was the cover first runner-up. If we didn't go with the porcelain room, this is where we were headed. So, right. So, and then textiles and trim. Those are these. You are the maestro here. What role do textiles and trim play?
So the French have always really embraced textiles and trims in a way that, I mean, even the word passementerie, which is, the trim, is a French word. It's all about, the French adore trims. They adore fabrics. They layer. The traditional curtains in France are 3 layers. So you've got, as you'll see, let me just move on to this slide, because you'll see, hang on, what am I doing wrong? There we go. You'll see it's often 3 layers, where there's a tied back, then there's the operable curtains, and then there's shears behind that. That is what is the traditional way you do drapes in France. But again, it's with the tied backs, it's with the embroidery. So you can see like the embroidery on the leading edges of curtains, things like that. It's really about, the French love textiles, and they embrace textiles to make them every part of their home. You can see here, again, this bed crown, where there's 2 different fabrics, and then you look up inside of it, and you see the beautiful detailing and the trim in that. Again, textiles are so very French.
Yeah. And then you had a lot of boiserie too, that was in some rooms, but you played with wallpaper where you didn't have it.
Yeah, again, wallpaper is really in it right now. It comes and goes. But I had some rooms where I really wanted to do 2 wallpaper. The 2 outer pictures are from my collection for Fromental, and the one on the left is sort of this Japanese sort of theme, which I put in one of the powder rooms of the chateau. On the right is called Jardin Français, French garden, which is in my bedroom. And again, those are big rooms, so you actually could have bigger patterns. The patterns in the middle are smaller patterns, because they're smaller rooms. And again, the picture on the left is one of my new wallpapers that's coming out in October from Schumacher.
Well, what I find interesting as we reach the end of this, and we're looking at the chateau as a whole here, is that what you fell in love with were the details, and what you've shown us is the details in interior design that are just gobsmacking and something we can study for hours, and that's been really special for us.
Thank you.
So thank you very much. We're going to leave you with we're going to take some questions and leave this. These are some key takeaways.
So yeah, let me just make a quick key takeaway from today. If you were going to take anything else, is make rooms work for you, or make them work for your clients. Figure out what is making them work. The next is that they really need to be lived in, not just looked at. So make sure you're using materials that allow that to happen. That comfort is absolutely key, and there's the 3 components of comfort: physical, practical, and psychological. Don't be afraid of color. Things shouldn't be too serious. Have some fun with them. Don't be afraid. I'm just reading. Textiles, using layers and layers of textiles, and wallpaper is such a key way to actually give a space personality. So that's just a quick overview, but we'd love to take it for questions. Any questions at all?
I saw some photos, some phones going up to take pictures of this. We have one over here.
And remember, I have a microphone, so just give me a second to get to you.
Hi, Hey, I was wondering, where did the benches go from the chapel?
The question is, where did the benches go from the chapel? My brother is an Episcopal minister. He has a chateau 40 minutes from me, and he had a chapel that needed everything. So it got the stained glass windows, it got the pews, it got the crucifix, it got everything. So it was reutilized in a very good way and kept it in the family.
What a great question. Thank you.
Okay. I can get
Because there's not a big market for pews.
Hi, good morning. Thank you for being here. I have a question about the renovation. When you take on a project of that size and you have that much damage, do you take out insurance? Who paid for that?
What's interesting is that there were a lot of setbacks that were not covered by insurance. Fortunately, the windows were covered by the painter's insurance and by my insurance. So that actually got covered by insurance. But for the most part, a lot of that kind of stuff is not covered by insurance. You know, the dying boxwood, all the other things, you know, are not covered. But it's helpful when it is. Question over here.
I noticed when you moved your kitchen into that other room, you had a ceramic tile in there, the clay tile. How did you get the water hooked up over there under that floor? Did you have to remove that floor?
No, we actually, there was a basement so we were able to come up from underneath.
Oh, okay.
So yes. Because that was 17th century tile, because that was one of the older sections.
So I lived in London in an 18th century building, no air conditioner. Summer was horrible when it gets to 90. But how do they do it when those walls are solid? How are they putting the HVAC units throughout those old buildings?
It's a great trick, because one of the things that all these all these old buildings, and all the apartments in Paris too, we've done this in Paris, they all have chimneys. And so we actually, and I didn't want people to be using the fireplaces in their bedrooms, because, you know, so we actually, all the ducting goes through the chimneys. So you get this wonderful, and what's interesting, so you don't see vents anywhere. Also, you don't have the sound of a vent because it's coming through this big space opening. So you just get this lovely soft flow of air. So we do it that way, and then if there's a basement, we come up through the lower level. So and come up through, yeah.
Did you hear that collective aha?
Yes.
Thank you so much. It's been amazing listening to you today. I have a question about plasters and lime washes, which are huge now in the American market, but they've been doing that in Europe for a long time. What are your thoughts about plaster in particular, European authentic lime plasters for texture?
Absolutely. Plaster in general, I think, is really making a big comeback. You'll see, and I mean sculptured plaster as well is making a huge comeback. All of the Cartier stores all over the world now are actually having fully plaster walled with relief and things like that. And I think that a lot of these things like lime washes, plaster washes, et cetera, I think really are making a comeback because they give such a wonderful sense of time and integrity. So I think that it's a wonderful look.
Any more questions?
Yeah.
We have one more back here.
Oh, got it.
Timothy is an old friend of yours. I'd like to know, do you still have that therapist, and when are you taking up golf?
I felt free to drop the therapist after he gave me permission to do what I wanted. So I didn't want to go for any other things because then he'd maybe say no to something. So that's great. Thank you.
That's probably a great note to maybe end on.
Yeah.
You know, right?
Thank you so much, you guys. It's been
Thank
wonderful.
you so much, Timothy.